This morning we covered two of these 6 pillars. We looked at the theology of the names, which basically is ontological. It's how Said Nursi understands creation as a divine book. Then we looked at the second pillar, the pillar of Ana, which is the key to that book, the key which unlocks the narratives in that book. This third pillar, concerns how we read the book. So basically this is epistemological. How we read the book. With what approach do we read the book? And Said Nursi has a very interesting concept pair. And this concept pair in Arabic is known as ma'nai ismi and ma'nai harfi. Now these are originally linguistic terms, but Said Nursi doesn't use them in their linguistic sense. And I suppose to understand them, we have to move away from the idea that they are linguistic terms. Firstly, I'm going to tell you how they translate roughly. It's very difficult to translate ma'nai ismi, ma'nai harfi. So after much deliberation, after much thinking and searching, we came up with the translation self-referential for ma'nai ismi and other-indicative for ma'nai harfi. And these two concepts, self-referential and other-indicative, represent two diametrically opposed positions that human beings can take as interpreters of the book. These are two positions that human beings can take as interpreters of the cosmic book. I was saying this morning that everyone in existence reads the cosmic book. Everyone, we all read it. And the verses of the cosmic book are being refreshed and replenished all the time. So reading is a constant. We all read. But how do we read? For Nursi, the choice is a very simple choice. Either we interpret the great book of the universe as being other-indicative, namely as signs pointing to the Creator, or the alternative way of reading is to uproot them from their divine origin and impose upon them a self-referential meaning, claiming that they indicate nothing apart from their own existence. So if I give you an example, a very crude example, there are two ways of reading an apple. If I put an apple on the table, there are two ways of reading it. There are two ways of reading the apple. You could say, yes, the apple is a fruit. It grows on a tree. It's made up of leaves and I don't know, skin and pith and stone, pips in the middle, and it's got vitamin C, A, B, possibly, and that's it. That's one way of reading the apple. There is another way of reading the apple. The apple points to one who has compassion. The apple points to one who has knowledge. because the creation of the apple requires knowledge. The apple points to one who has wisdom, because there is a wisdom in the teleology of the apple. The apple is there in order to provide nourishment. So the apple points to one who is the provider. See what's happening here? Two ways of reading the apple. The one refers only to the apple. So it is self-referential. The apple doesn't have any meaning outside itself. It's something you eat. It's green. It's a fruit. Finished. The other way is to read it as a sign. A collection of signs, actually, which point to all of those divine attributes that we were talking about this morning. And a very good example of this ismi and harfi dichotomy or polarity is used by Sayyid Nursi when he juxtaposes the Quranic view of the cosmos with the view of the cosmos taken by natural philosophy. This is Nursi's exposition of ismi and harfi. He says, and I quote, "The all-wise Quran regards beings, each of which is a meaningful letter, as bearing the meaning of another. That is, it looks at them on account of their maker. It says how beautifully they have been made, how exquisitely they point to their maker's beauty, thus showing the universe's true beauty. But the philosophy they call natural philosophy, or science, involves itself with the decorations of the letters of beings and their relationships, and has become bewildered. It has confused the way of reality. However, the letters of this mighty book," and he means the mighty book of creation, "should be seen as bearing the meaning of another. But the naturalists and philosophers have not done this. Instead, they see beings as signifying only themselves." Does anyone want to make any comment about this so far?
What do you mean by signifying only themselves?
The apple doesn't signify a creator. The apple just is the apple. It's only important in and of itself.
Right, okay.
What we're doing here, we are making a connection between the apple. Let's call it a horizontal connection between the apple and the owner of the attributes. The apple is telling us something about its owner. Yes?
Yeah.
It's saying, the one who created me must have knowledge. Because to create an apple, you need knowledge. The one who created me must be the provider, because the apple provides nourishment. The one who created me must have wisdom, because there is a purpose in this apple. Yeah? This is other-indicative, and the other is with a capital O because it means God. In other words, it's reading the creation as signs pointing to God. What happens if we cut that relationship? What happens if we cut this horizontal relationship? The apple is not indicating anything except itself.
Sorry, you said reading the other as God.
No, reading, the other means God there. The other with a capital O. Other indicative means indicating God, basically.
Right.
We need also sun and etc.
Sorry?
For one single apple, also we need sun and also universal system and etc.
Yes,
Earth
yes.
and etc. Rain and
Yeah. So basically, it's a means of it's a way of interpreting. Either you read the signs in creation as signs pointing to God, or you read them just in a very materialistic way. It's just an apple. We can study the apple. It has vitamins, it has minerals, it's green, It consists of all these things, but that's all. And Self-Referentiality says that human beings read the creation either self-referentially or other-indicatively. Now, he would say that if you're a believer, you are supposed to read the creation other-indicatively, because everything is a sign of God.
Okay.
Yeah?
So
Now,
how did he frame that? Because obviously he must have been in conversation with some of these scientists,
Yes.
with scientism,
yes, yes.
right?
Well, clearly, science doesn't make a horizontal connection. Science sees the apple and studies the apple from a material point of view, you know, which is fine. But to say that this is the only way of understanding the apple is dangerous. It's false, first of all. So why do people read the creation self-referentially? Why?
Going back to the Anna again.
Absolutely.
The I.
Absolutely. So interpreting the cosmos, the whole of the cosmos, as self-referential is a result of this
Putting yourself in
abuse of Anna, actually. Yes. Because you want to be self-referential. You don't want to have a connection with God. So therefore you say that nothing has a connection with anything else. It only points to itself. So it's all about pointing. Which way do the things in creation point? Do they point only to themselves? Or do they point somewhere else? Self-Referentiality says that all of us, read the creation either self-referentially or other-indicatively. And we mix. Some things we read other-indicatively, some things we read self-referentially. And that is secularism. That is the key to secularism.
You pick and choose whatever suits you.
Yes.
At the moment.
See, or should.
Oh, sure, yes, of course.
If you were to give the apple the ability to speak, would it say that, look, all the studies and all what you're doing about me, I'm not really just that, I'm really more than that?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is like anything in creation, that we have imposed our way of reading it onto it.
Yes.
Poor apple doesn't have anything, you know, so look,
Yes.
they'll read me just
Yes.
like this, you know, a bit more than that. So any sign, really, in nature or in creation,
Anything, yeah.
anything, is actually saying,
It's
so we
saying
can't hear it.
It's a nice idea, you know, if it could speak, it would tell us about its creator.
Yeah.
Because it can't speak, it tells us in silence about
Yes.
its creator.
And Nursi has a poem about the stars. Listen to the stars, what they say. So actually,
Yes. But actually the creation is speaking to us.
Yeah, different.
It's speaking to us with a silent voice. It's very interesting. I was reading about biology, and a very, very famous biologist was talking about the human body, how wonderful and marvelous the human body is, and how interconnected it is, and you know, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for him to make a connection. And at the end, he said, "Isn't it strange to think that all of these marvelous things have no purpose?" He said, "Because they have no purpose."
Oh, he actually said that.
Yes, oh, he says it, yes. They have no purpose. He said they come from nothing, blind chance, and they have no purpose. He said they're just there, it's natural. I think I got a piece from his book maybe later on. And I'm thinking, you've just talked about order, you've talked about beauty, you've talked about wisdom, you've talked about knowledge, you've talked about all of these things, harmony, measure, and you haven't made a connection? So the connection is cut. Human beings are only important in and of themselves. The whole of creation has no meaning.
As you said earlier in the program, the man is by nature, you know, by nature he's created so that he recognizes the creator.
Yes.
And when you suppress that urge in you, you have to find another way of expressing it.
Yeah.
You can't really extract it from your system to the extent that you actually just have no recollection or memory of it at all. You have these urges coming and disturbing you, and you have to find a language because you don't recognize religion as such. You don't recognize connection as such. But there is the connection in the very makeup of you.
Yes.
So I suppose we have to somehow just find words, Mother Nature, spirituality,
He's recognized the attributes, and he says, well, these attributes, all of these attributes are from the thing itself.
Yeah.
So nature creates itself.
By definition, otherwise he'd be, if I may use the word I don't like, he'd be religious in
Yes.
commons.
Yeah, he would believe in a creator.
Yeah.
He would believe in a creator.
There's no third alternative.
Yeah.
It's either one or the other.
Yes.
So it's an extreme form of ana, covering up.
It's a result of ana covering up, because you know why we do it.
Right.
Why do we give the attributes of the creation? Why do we look self-referentially?
Yeah.
Because we want to be self-referential.
Yes.
We don't want to have that relationship. So we cut that relationship.
And I think Surah Ar-Rahman deals with this.
Yes. Yeah, a very good example actually.
But you don't sometimes think some of the
I don't have a pen. Do you have a pen?
yes, white.
I want to joke that this Surah Rahman is. I haven't thought of that.
It questions. There's question after question after question.
Yeah.
Which of your favors?
Lord's favors. Lord's favors.
Yeah. It fits in perfectly with self-referentiality. Which of your Lord's favors you don't? They don't deny the existence of the apple. They don't deny the vitamins. They don't deny the color. None of that's denied. But it's not one of the favors of your Lord. So self-referentiality, and Anna does this because Anna doesn't want to have a connection. Because if you have a connection, if you acknowledge a connection, then you have a responsibility. So I'm self-referential, everything else is self-referential. The biologist is talking about all of the wonders of the human body and says at the end there's no purpose. Why? Because if there's a purpose, his life must have a purpose. So he denies both. He denies the purpose of the human body, he denies the purpose of himself. So for Nursi, interpreting the cosmos as self-referential is a result of this skewed vision, this wrong vision of the Ana. Now, in contradistinction to this, an interpretation of the cosmos which is mediated by revelation will see everything as being other-indicative. It will see everything as signs, ayat. Ayat in the afaq, ayat in the anfus. Everything. Which indicate their divine origin. Now, for Nursi, the truth of this the Quranic claim is self-evident. And it's the only truth that we can choose if we want salvation. So for salvation, we have to learn to read. And do you remember the very first Iqra? The very first word in Quran revealed to the Prophet ﷺ was Iqra. Now, Iqra means read, it also means interpret. So, the Prophet ﷺ said, how should I interpret? And the answer? Yeah, in the name of your Lord. So, the Prophet, right from the outset, is being told to read the creation other-indicatively.
Right.
Read the creation in the name of your Lord.
So the first surah itself is
The very first verse is read.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق
Yes.
الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم. So it talks about بالقلم.
Yes.
So blood clot and pen. So knowledge comes from
Yes.
higher authority.
This is all about other-indicativeness. So the very, very first thing that the Prophet is told is to read the creation, interpret the creation as pointing to God. And this is the way to belief. And Nursi says about belief. Where is it? Oh, I didn't write it down. He says, belief makes man into man. It makes man into a king. Since this is so, man's basic duty is belief and supplication. Supplication, dua. Unbelief makes man into an extremely impotent beast. So we talked before about, asfal as-safilin, and the highest of the high and the lowest of the low. It depends on how we read the creation. It depends on how we interpret the creation. So, if, as Nursi claims, our goal is to see everything as other-indicative, what's the result? The result is a vision in which all things in the created realm are invested with a kind of sacredness. All things become sacred. Because they all point to the transcendent, they all point to God. So, water is no different from a flower, an atom is no different from a mountain. The sun is no different from a dog. They are all pointing to something else. And of course, hand in hand with this goes Nursi's theology of the beautiful names, in which all creation is the manifestation of the divine attributes. What about self-referentiality? It's not just a way of reading the creation, it also helps us to understand this very misunderstood word, or this misunderstood term, hayat ad-dunya. We see hayat ad-dunya a lot. It appears a lot in the Quran, and scholars talk about hayat ad-dunya. How would you translate it?
Worldly life.
Worldly life.
Worldly life. Anyone have any alternatives? I've seen this a lot, worldly life, worldly life. There is a sense in which hayat ad-dunya is worldly life.
Or temporal life.
Or temporal life, possibly.
I think it's dunya, the word dunya itself is from dun. So it's lowly, or the
Yes.
other level.
Yes.
Angelic and the asfal as-safilin. So it's the
Yeah.
asfal as-safilin closer to that than to ahsan taqweem.
Yeah. Dunya means the lowest, actually.
The lowest, yeah, dunya is the lowest, yes.
It's the feminine form of adna. Adna means low.
Lower, yes.
Lower.
Yes.
Dunya means the very lowest.
Yes.
The very lowest form of existence. Now, it will help us to understand this if we think about ismi and harfi. Now, worldly life is mistranslated, is a mistranslation. And because it's mistranslated, it's also misunderstood. And misunderstanding of hayat ad-dunya in the Nursian context has led some people to say that Nursi's attitude to material existence is a world-denying attitude. A lot of people think that Nursi denies the world because he talks about hayat ad-dunya a lot. And we know that dunya is as important as akhirah because dunya is the field for akhirah. Now, Nursi doesn't reject dunya. What he rejects is this ma'naya ismi attitude. What he rejects is the self-referential approach to creation, which gives created beings something which amounts to a life of their own, in a sense, hence the word hayat, and an existence which is celebrated without any reference to God. So for biologists, the apple, yes, the apple it has a life of its own, basically. It points to itself. It doesn't point to God. And this attitude, this ismi attitude, this self-referential attitude, leads to hayat ad-dunya. It's the lowest form of life. It's the lowest way of looking at things. In fact, Nursi says that the world has three faces. One is the mirror to God's names, another looks to the hereafter, and it's arable field. Arable field means the world. The world is where you sow the seeds of the hereafter. And the third looks to transience and non-existence. In the Quran it says that كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكْ إِلَّا وَجْهُ. Everything passes away except the face of Allah.
Rahman again.
Yes. Yes, from Surah Rahman again. Now, this third face represents the world of those who worship the world. This is what Nursi says. This third face, which looks to transience and to non-existence, is the world of those who give self-referential meanings to everything. Thus turning it into what Nursi calls the source of all wrongdoing and the source of calamities. So, hayat ad-dunya comes from not reading creation in the right way, not using ana in the right way, not seeing the beautiful names in creation, not making that connection, or purposefully cutting that connection. But Nursi's notion of the self-referential and other indicative has importance for us, for our own behavior, even as believers. Especially when we're talking about amal salih, righteous deeds. Why? Well, in the Nursian understanding, what is true of the material constituents of the cosmos is also true of human behavior. And it's particularly true when we talk about acts of worship. Why do we see some things as sacred and other things as not? Why do we see some things as an act of worship and other things as not? You know, sometimes I ask my students, I say, going to Friday prayer, is that an act of worship? Yes. Fasting, is that an act of worship? Yes. How about driving to Sainsbury's?
Act of worship.
No one says it's an act of worship.
But it is.
They say that's worldly life. People actually make a division between acts of worship and worldly life. They say this is hayat ad-dunya. For
But
Nursi,
again, there are lots of ahadith which indicate that anything, if it's done with other indicative,
yes,
it's a form of worship. I mean, eating and while away your time with, your friends.
yes,
If it's the right time, the right place, it's actually a form of worship. Everything, every act of man
absolutely.
is an act of worship.
And this is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It boils down to intention at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nursi says intention is a mysterious elixir.
Yes.
It's a mysterious substance, changing ordinary acts and customs into acts of worship. So Nursi does not divide acts into acts of worship and other things. Right?
It's actually a secular approach.
This is a purely secular approach.
Yes, very, very.
So, going to Friday prayer is religious. Walking to Sainsbury's, getting food for your family is hayat dunya or how. You can do Friday prayer with the wrong intention.
Yes.
I'm going to go to Friday prayer because my neighbor will see me. And if I don't go, he'll start telling people that I'm not really a Muslim. So I'm going to go to Friday prayer. So, you know, that prayer is not sacred. But someone who's going to Sainsbury's and saying, right, I'm going to Sainsbury's because my Creator tells me I need to look after my family, I need to buy food, I need to provide. That going to Sainsbury's is sacred.
Yes.
It's an act of worship. Now, we live in a very secular world, but we Muslims are very secular.
Yeah.
We are probably more secular, actually.
Yeah.
And we have no excuse. So any action, unless it's haram, of course, is considered sacred if it's connected directly to God and carried out in His name and understood other-indicatively, not self-referentially. Oh, what does Sainsbury's have to do with God? Is God not Razak? Is God not the provider? Is Sainsbury's not just a means whereby God is providing for you? So, Nursi avoids this false dichotomy of the religious and the secular, or the worldly. People admit to having a worldly life. They say, yes, Akhi, this is my worldly life. Hayat al-Dunya doesn't mean worldly life. Hayat al-Dunya means the worst kind of existence, where you're attributing things not to God, but to themselves. So Nursi avoids this. And he sees a world in which all things and all behaviors are potentially sacred, depending, as the brother here said, on intention. Not just intention, but on reading the cosmos in the correct way, which is other-indicatively. So this notion of ismi mana harfi is quite revolutionary. I haven't seen it anywhere else in this particular fashion, in this way. I haven't found any other scholar who's actually talked about it so continuously. Nursi is always talking about ismi harfi. Maybe not in so many words, but he's always referring to it in his writing. That is all actually I have to say on ismi and harfi. It's the third pillar. What I think we should do now is maybe think about all three pillars that we've looked at today, which is the theology of the names, the issue of ana, and also self-referentiality and other-indicativeness, because they all go together.